Catherine the Great, Empress of Ambition and Empire. In the 18th century, Europe was a chessboard of absolute monarchs, rising empires, and Enlightenment philosophers. Among this turbulent landscape emerged one of the most formidable figures in Russian and indeed European history, Catherine II, remembered as Catherine the Great. Her reign, spanning 34 years, would see the transformation of Russia into a modern imperial power, fueled by intellect, diplomacy, ambition, and paradox. Catherine was born as Princess Sophie Friederike August von Anhalt-Zerbst on May 2, 1729, in the modest Prussian city of Stettin. Though of minor nobility, her family possessed strong ties to several royal houses of Europe. Raised in a disciplined Lutheran household, young Sophie was exposed early to rigorous education in languages, philosophy, etiquette, and court politics. Even as a child, she exhibited an astute sense of observation, a strategic mind, and a relentless desire to transcend the limitations imposed by gender and rank. In 1744, the Russian Empress Elizabeth, niece of Peter the Great, invited Sophie to Russia as a prospective bride for her nephew and heir, Grand Duke Peter. The decision, though politically calculated, was transformative for Sophie. Upon arrival, she converted to Eastern Orthodoxy, taking the name Ekaterina Alexeyevna. This act of religious and cultural assimilation not only solidified her political standing, but marked her unwavering determination to root herself in Russian soil. Catherine's marriage to Peter proved deeply incompatible. Where she was learned, composed, and politically aware, Peter was immature, erratic, and obsessed with military games. As his disdain for Russian customs grew, so too did the nobility's distrust of him. Isolated emotionally, Catherine channeled her energy into intellectual pursuits, reading the works of Montesquieu, Voltaire, and Machiavelli, and cultivated secret alliances with key political, military, and clerical figures. The year 1762 marked a decisive turning point. Upon ascending to the throne, Peter III implemented a series of controversial reforms and alienated his supporters. Within 6 months, Catherine launched a coup d'état with the aid of the Imperial Guard, notably led by her lover, Grigory Orlov. Peter was swiftly arrested, and shortly thereafter, died under mysterious circumstances. On July 9, 1762, Catherine was crowned Empress and autocrat of all the Russias, ushering in an era that would both dazzle and disrupt. Catherine saw herself as an enlightened ruler, deeply influenced by the philosophies of Voltaire and Diderot, with whom she corresponded directly. She convened the Legislative Commission in 1767 to reform Russian law and championed ideals of rational governance, education, and economic modernization. Yet despite her progressive rhetoric, many of her reforms stalled amid resistance from the aristocracy and the immensity of the empire's feudal structure. Catherine's reign thus revealed the inherent contradiction of enlightened absolutism, a paradox of freedom articulated from a throne of unchecked power.
Under Catherine's reign, Russia witnessed a flourishing of the arts and intellectual life. She founded the Smolny Institute for Noble Maidens, the first state-financed higher education institution for women in Europe, and greatly expanded the Hermitage Museum. The Russian Academy of Sciences grew in stature, and she encouraged translations of major European works into Russian. Catherine's court became a beacon of culture, rivaling Paris and Vienna, positioning her as both ruler and muse. Geopolitically, Catherine was a formidable strategist. Her military campaigns against the Ottoman Empire secured access to the Black Sea and expanded Russian influence into Crimea, the Caucasus, and the Balkans. Through the 3 successive partitions of Poland, 1772, 1793, 1795, Russia absorbed vast territories, altering the balance of power in Eastern Europe. These expansions, while celebrated domestically, drew criticism abroad and sowed the seeds of future unrest. Despite her imperial achievements, not all subjects welcomed Catherine's rule. The Pugachev Rebellion, a massive peasant uprising led by Emelian Pugachev, revealed the deep discontent festering beneath the surface of serfdom. Pugachev, claiming to be the deposed Peter III mobilized tens of thousands against the nobility. Although the revolt was crushed, it deeply unnerved Catherine. In its aftermath, she abandoned any serious plans to reform the institution of serfdom and reinforce the power of the landed aristocracy. Beyond politics, Catherine's court was a dynamic theater of personal intrigue and influence. Her series of lovers, most notably Grigory Potemkin, were often confidants and political advisors. Far from frivolous affairs, these relationships served as instruments of statecraft, helping her navigate the complexities of court factions. Catherine remained, throughout her life, intellectually engaged and politically vigilant, even as criticism mounted over her perceived extravagance and autocracy. Catherine continued to rule energetically into her late 60s. Her final years were marked by continued imperial management, artistic patronage, and concern over her son Paul, whose temperament and politics she found troubling. She reportedly intended to bypass him in the line of succession in favor of her grandson, Alexander. However, she died suddenly of a stroke on November 17, 1796, at the age of 67. Paul I succeeded her, quickly reversing many of her policies. Catherine II remains one of the most enigmatic figures in Russian history. She was at once an enlightened thinker and an autocrat, a reformer and a defender of serfdom, a foreigner who became the very symbol of Russian imperial strength. Her reign expanded Russian territory by over 200,000 square miles and positioned Russia as a central player in European affairs. Yet, her promises of liberty and reason often faltered beneath the weight of dynastic preservation and feudal power. More than 2 centuries after her death, Catherine the Great remains a subject of admiration, debate, and fascination. She reshaped the Russian monarchy, elevated the arts and sciences, and defined an era of ambition fused with contradiction. In her own words, "A great wind is blowing, and that gives you either imagination or a headache." For Catherine, it gave a legacy that continues to stir imagination and shape history.